I got Jasmine's book, which I hadn't read reviewed or anything. I didn't know that about it. Oh, sorry. Do you want to just explain the name a bit to us all?
Well, I could.
Please.
I could. Birdsplaining and Natural History. Well, the one thing that people have said about it, other than sniggering when they see it, is that it's memorable.
Yes.
So people do remember the name. It's meant as a play, obviously, on mansplaining. And it's partly to do with the propensity of certain people who like birds explaining birds without necessarily being invited to explain birds. But it's also...
Which I think you can repeat that again if you wish. That line there. I liked that one best, without necessarily being asked to explain.
We'll come back to that, I'm sure. Yeah, uninvited expertise is... If any of you were at the panel earlier, it was something that I mentioned, uninvited provision of expertise. I love expertise.
Actually, I'm not sure you do love expertise, and we'll explore that in a minute.
Okay, we can.
With the field guide thing, for example.
Well...
Yes, there's some really lovely experts there that you don't... Anyway, I'm taking us down the stairs.
I haven't finished. Hang on.
I've just done it!
You asked me to explain the title.
Please.
There's too many stories. There's too many threads.
Yeah,
Do
please,
you want to finish your story?
No, I don't.
Oh God, I hear it later. I told them all.
No, it's...
So it's partly it's a play on mansplaining, but also, as they explain in the intro to the book, I kind of understand the world through birds, and I'm sure that's something I share with a lot of people in the room. That birds are kind of the way I look at the world, and I'm not a bird expert. So it's also a way of exploring ideas, exploring our relationship to the natural world, to one another, and I kind of do it through birds. So it's a bit coy, the title, but it's certainly...
The title might be coy, but the rest isn't.
Okay, so I've finished my interruption of you. Tell your story.
Okay. Well, basically, I don't know what I thought I was taking downstairs, but what I did think I was taking downstairs was one of the best bodies of essays that I've ever read.
Oh, crikey.
I just wasn't expecting it. I was expecting more of the usual. And if there's one thing you don't write, it's more of the usual. So I've had to apologise. I am a fanboy. I'm not going to be doing a lot of critical stuff here. So if you're looking for critical stuff, I'm not your man. As soon as I got into it, I love it when people... Well, I can give you an example with our own books that gets me into trouble with my life, okay? When Arnaud was with you, making recordings was this the Azores? Where was this? Over Cape Verde? When your mother was dying, your mum was dying, and we had to get you off. When was that?
2004?
Yeah?
2004, yeah. Good for you.
And we talked, which you heard us all talking earlier on about the sort of the bird side and the bird stories and the this and the other. But of course, through that runs real life. And you lost your mum. What age were you?
17.
And you told me you looked at that landscape with the eyes of your mother.
Yeah, because my mum was a geography teacher. So I found myself with this job where I get opportunities to visit all kinds of places that my mum would have dreamed about seeing.
So in amongst Petrel's Night and Day, which is just a great romping read that you can read in the boat, and people have it skidding over in the water and all sorts of great stories about how they saw this petrel and that petrel and the other petrel, I snuck in a bit of real life. And my wife said, well, you need to get your mum in there as well, see if you can, Which was typical of her attitude towards what we're doing. But I love to get real life in amongst the stuff, because, we're either avoiding real life when we're birding, or, whatever we're doing, we're not And then you brought me real life. A big bloody great wad of it straight at the front. I mean, you just went straight in there, didn't you? The first two essays, the one about your personal health, are you willing to describe a little bit of that and your sister?
Yeah. And it's not charged, and it was a long time ago, so it's not sort of a raw thing. My sister died of breast cancer, undiagnosed breast cancer, because she was too afraid to get checked until it was too late. And it put me at a statistically higher risk because of family history, so I had to have an annual mammogram. So until the age of 50, when suddenly, from one day to the next, I was at the same risk as everybody else, which is just a little bit weird about statistics. But so every year I would travel to Swansea for my annual mammogram, and every year it brought up for me my sister's death. It was like so it was always the same time of year. So it was just kind of this cycle, and then there's always this gap where you're waiting for the results. And any woman in this room will probably know about that, and it's a common experience, but it was something that I did every year. And then of course there are all the other women and often couples who are waiting in the waiting room, and they all have their own stories, and you can see the fear and the grief and the uncertainty and everything. So the essay was called Reading the Signs. And it was a combination of that account, but also memories of my sister, memories of birds with my sister. I grew up in a very bird crazy family. And we also had pet birds. We had, first we had budgies, and then we had zebra finches. So it was interwoven with memories of my sister. But mostly what it was about was having a bird in the house, and the folklore about having a bird in the house. Foretelling a death. And before I had the news of my sister, there was a wren in my house. So not that I actually thought it foretold her death, but I just was exploring those interconnections. Does that capture what you
It does capture, and it was not what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting to have my heart in your hands. I was expecting to fall asleep. So then I had to read it to Mo. I went, bloody hell, listen to this. It wasn't, but the caliber, but that's what I liked, and I think you know this. The caliber of the writing, for nature writing, and was just gripping, and so I was just so taken with it. Suddenly, here it was. Here was this sort of, just real life in amongst the birds, and then the way you were talking about. The way we all do it, but we perhaps serious birders try not to admit to it. Of one for sorrow, one for joy, one for a girl, one for a boy. All of those things that we've all got sort of inside us that we just quietly tick over, especially if we're anxious, especially if we're just about to see if all of that was there, and it was lovely, and I loved it. And so. Then there was the sort of and the thing I like the most of all is this is your personal experience, and you're describing your personal experience, and in my opinion anyone else can get lost because it's your personal experience. How on earth can anyone make comment on it if it's your own personal experience? You sort of mean that's how you feel and you felt and you wrote and you communicated to me, and I thought, wow. So then it was it. Sleep was gone. But then you really got into an area that interests me, because I'm very, very interested in the way bird field guides are describing things and doing things. So would you like to tell us a little bit about the bird guides you learned from?
Yes. This essay actually came about because I went to my local secondhand bookshop, which has if anyone ever goes to Aberystwyth, go to Ystwyth Books. Yes.
Yeah.
back room full of nature. Well, you know what I'm talking about. You can spend hours in there. It's a fantastic nature writing section. And I found the bird book that I had when I was very young, sort of, that visceral sense you have of recognizing something from really early childhood. And it was the first one must have been, was it a 1950s Collins? I can't remember, had a Hessian cover.
I think we know, don't we, Kelly? What do you think it was?
I'm not sure if it was Collins. There are so many different books, but was it British birds or European?
British, yeah.
British birds.
Yeah.
It was probably Richard Fitterland.
I certainly name it in here, but I'm not remembering.
Illustrations like.
Go.
Okay, but this isn't the problem. It was the 72 Collins.
This
So it was the issue.
I'm thinking about what's his name? Hansel Fitter. Well, if it was cause.
No, you're
It was. It would be
Peterson. You're thinking, surely.
Richard Richardson. That's who had if it was British birds.
Do you know what Richard Richardson was like?
No.
I mean, he illustrates the best book on British birds. Peterson did European birds, so because British birds it would be Richard Richardson with Richard.
Okay, I'm getting really confused here. No, it's an old Collins guide, right? Field Guide to the Birds of Britain and Europe. So this was 50 something.
Okay, well that'd be Peterson.
Okay,
Which is what it sounds like when you're describing it.
but then the other one that I refer to is well, should I just read this passage? Okay, because we're kind of walking around the subject. Right. So I have a memory of looking at this bird book, which was my family's field guide for years and which I still have. The one with the kestrel on the cover, the paperback field guide. Never mind. Birds were so much the natural order of things when I was a child that I never noticed it. And the field guide was so much part of the natural order that I internalized its patterns and relationships without ever noticing them either. But now when I open the book again at random on a page of finches, the red bullfinch, pale linnet, red-polled white, grosbeak, crossbill, those patterns and relationships stand out starkly and are impossible to ignore. In each illustration, the female is perched behind the male. Where his posture is upright, bold, declarative, she's bent over, submissive and demure. Overleaf, the hawfinch, brambling, greenfinch and siskin are depicted the same way. The horizontal female behind the upright male, the goldfinch and citralfinch each show one bird with the note sex is similar. Elsewhere, it's even more marked. The male always appears in the foreground, upright, and the female's horizontal or dipped down or even crouched down in the posture she might assume for mating. Half of her is always obscured by the male. And once I noticed that pattern, suddenly I just couldn't unnotice it. And I looked through the whole book. Obviously, there are variations and there are exceptions.
The supine nature of the female says it all, doesn't it?
And the wheat ears was really striking because I was very taken with wheat ears. We spend a lot of time bird watching in Israel. My mother is Israeli. So we went to see family and that was kind of formative for me and all of the various wheat ears. And the female wheat ears, I mean, they're shown a third of the size of the males. And the males are shown in comparison to one another, but the females aren't. So it's not just that you might not even notice the female, but you certainly can't identify her of a female wheat ear of any number of sort of similar species because she's not fully illustrated.
Yeah.
So it was those sorts of patterns that I suddenly started to see. And not recent field guides. Obviously, that's not the case in recent field guides. But we're talking about when I was 10 years old. It completely shaped how I saw birds. So that ultimately, it's seeing the male bird that is seeing a species. Seeing a female of the bird always feels like you haven't quite fully... It's not fully an identification, or it's not fully pleasurable the way seeing a male is. And I hate to think what that says about means my relationship with men, but let's leave that aside. And it's no surprise, right, that those patterns should be there. because those are the patterns, the society in which the field guide was created. And what's been so interesting is people's responses to that. Never having noticed it, women are not surprised, men are shocked.
Yeah.
But it's part of a pattern of depiction and relative value that are the sort of so embedded in the society of the sort of 60s and 70s that were formative to women, right? And up until now. So yeah, that was the field guide chapter, and then just.
But you also said how it defined you at the end of that particular essay.
Yeah, shall I read that?
Please, because it really hit me hard when I read it.
Let me find that.
In fact, I've quoted it in my own book.
The final paragraph.
Is it the bit I'm talking about, how you define it?
Yeah. By extension, it's no surprise, I suppose, that I find it difficult to see the equal value of my own life or any woman's life when viewed through such familiar and easily recognizable patterns. Those patterns laid down so early on were echoed and reinforced by representations of sexual difference every time I opened a bird book.
As a bloke, right, I sit next to Paul and we're driving along and I think, I'm not as obsessed as he is. Or you, Renee, but especially Killy. I'm sure I'm not as obsessed as he is with birds. But we would never admit to being defined by birds, even though they fill every minute of our thinking brain. We would never admit that had influence. And so that hit me hard. I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't thought that our own obsessions, do you know what I mean, were also being defined, you know what I mean, so clearly defined, our own position, what we thought. And then I saw it yesterday. Was anyone here yesterday? Yeah. So the question I asked at the end of the thing so basically we saw a lovely lecture where they had a really badly stuffed female cuckoo, and they were catching all the cuckoos, all the male cuckoos, and they were doing all this work on male cuckoos, and they were showing us all sorts of lovely things about male cuckoos and the BTO and where they were going and what they were doing. No time did he say it was only male cuckoos.
Oh, he didn't.
He never said that. He told us he was only catching male cuckoos.
All the names were male.
And what did you hear him say under his breath, or was it under his breath? I asked if about female data with female cuckoos, and you heard him say.
Well, the first excuse he gave was that they tagged one cuckoo a female and it didn't have a very good ending. So from that point on, they weren't licensed to tag any more female cuckoos. But then he also added on that they thought that tagging females may have interrupted or interfered with their data set from that point. Yeah.
So we're unfortunately overheard.
But not on record. Well, it is on record.
Well, it's just on record. No, we have it on record earlier because we filmed him saying it. But the point really is that there you have another male researcher with a male bias, fed by the books that he read, because he's probably just approaching 60 or in his 50s, all fed in by the same stuff that you're describing here so vividly. And then even when questioned, not happy to sort of open up and listen and think, because with cuckoos, and excuse me if you heard me sort of say this before, but everything is about the female. Everything's about the female cuckoo because she is especially designed for that nest. Now, I didn't quite understand, perhaps someone understood better than me. He sort of suggested that wasn't the case, didn't he? But he didn't seem to want to talk to me afterwards much, and I really don't know if I believe him. But she is organised for the dunnock or for the reed warbler. She will produce an egg genetically to match that. Her young will only be able to talk to the reed warblers or the dunnocks. All of that is fairly well documented. It's not, it's not my work. It's the work of people who work with the BTO and everyone else. So I just felt, did you feel the same or not really, that we were experiencing just a little bit of male bias there?
felt like something was being missed, potentially.
Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for. That all of the interesting stuff was on the female side. And when you think that all of biology, including human biology, is geared up to female choice, that makes it even more shocking, because you think that every biological study would start with the intriguing curiosity of what was happening with the females. Because the females... So if we take a morning chorus, let's take a morning chorus. Let's say we go out tomorrow. They've already started, so we've got lovely missile thrushes singing and song thrushes. It's all to do with female choice. Everything they're doing is to do with female choice. It's not males proclaiming anything. This is to do with attracting females. We talked today about the nightingales and how everything is geared up. And the minute they've been chosen by a female, they stop singing during the night altogether. So the behaviour changes immediately. And you would think that would be sort of quite strongly, and also the BTO is run by a woman, you would think that would be deeper in than it is. So that... Oh.
Question for you, and you're talking about rectifying this imbalance or this bias or balance, ensuring why there isn't.
First of all, I'm ashamed of it.
Well, I mean, we're shaped by the context in which we learn, aren't we? And the questions that you ask in science and the data that you look for is determined by
the field guide that I looked at. I learned on the same field guide, or the same field guides. I had the same supine in a copulation state female behind the erect male. All of those things were what influenced me as well.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I was a bit shocked.
Can we just interject with one point?
Yeah, please. Yeah, Killian's desperate.
I think it's a mistake to interpret the posture of the female in the Peterson guide, the original, as supine. If you're designing a field guide, you have very limited space on the page.
I would just point out to everyone, Killian designs field guides, okay? If you haven't got the Collins guide, he designs field guide.
But you have to have a different posture to show anything of the bird. If you put them both in the same posture, you will make less effective, you'll have less space. By occupying the space that is kind of available behind the male, I'm not expecting...
But I've never seen one of your illustrations with a supine female.
No, because by the time I was doing field guides, we realized that you have to show not just the female, but the juvenile, and you have to give them all as much as possible. In fact, if anything, you prioritize the more difficult plumes, which are the females, because they require more effort. The male could have been 20% smaller because he's so distinct.
Easier.
And sometimes we have done that. But I don't think it was a conscious, I'm guessing, I don't think it was a conscious decision on the part of the...
No, I think that's the problem. It wasn't a combust.
So it wasn't to make it supine. The other reason that the females were underrepresented is they are far less well known. Yeah. They're more difficult. Yeah. It's the same, but if you look at the Peterson's treatment of gulls, there were no young birds. None at all. Because they didn't know them. They didn't know how to tell them apart. It's just too difficult. So they only showed adults and juveniles. They didn't show any of the intermediate. And I think the same is true of female. Female wheat ears are more difficult. And in the 50s and 60s, they were impossible. They just didn't
that's an excuse.
But doesn't that represent where the interest has been, though? The knowledge, I mean, it's not just about ease of identification. It's also the effort that goes into finding out enough information to be able to identify one or the other. So,
yes.
So behind it, I mean, I take your point, and there are aesthetic questions as well about the appearance on the page, and there's certain. I can see that there are some beautiful aesthetic solutions that are created in the depiction of us. But when the pattern is so sustained across species, across pages, page after page, it suggests not just the difficulty or the lack of information or the lack of data, but a lack of priority and awareness. And so it's, I should make clear, I'm not outraged by it. I'm not at any point saying I'm outraged by it. It was an observation on my part that there were these patterns.
Which is hope for me.
And those patterns shaped, therefore, the kind of priority that I placed on birds. I wasn't trashing anybody in the process.
If I can ask you, there's just a couple of lines there, but you write about how when we say we've seen a bullfinch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I won't find it, but because I haven't marked it. But yeah, I mean, I if I say I've seen a bullfinch, and I think this is true of a lot of people that I talk to about birds, if I say I've seen a bullfinch, I mean I've seen a male bullfinch. If I've seen a female hen harrier, I say I've seen a ringtail or I've seen a female. If I've seen a male, I just say I've seen a hen harrier. That tends to be the default. Is if you don't qualify it, but if it's female, it's qualified as female. If you don't qualify it, you mean the male. Not everybody does that. I'm not making a universal claim here, but it's definitely, I catch myself doing it. And I also catch myself seeing the female bullfinch and looking for the male.
Yeah.
I think that's worse. I think I've seen a lovely male hen harrier. And then they just, I say a lovely ringtail.
Yeah, I might say a beautiful silver hen harrier.
A lovely hand waving in the back. Did you want to join in?
The stuff that you mention about the things to do with how birds are portrayed in textbooks, in field guides, it reminds me a little bit of something I've recently learned about museum collections, which are very often disproportionate, not just in terms of species, but also the members of the species, which tend to be put on display, or the majority of a collection are made up of. It tends to be the more visually impressive individuals of a particular species, i.e. with birds of paradise, it's overwhelmingly the males.
I think you could understand that with birds of paradise.
But please, may I take...
Sorry, can I just ask the one question? It's only a minor one. I don't know the field guide. You know, my parents, because they knew I was interested in birds, taught me the observer's book of what sits and stuff and whatevers, but I never got field guide until I kind of got to about 12 or something, found my own. But what about the birds of prey? How are they depicted? Because I know you said not everybody was like that, but I just wondered with birds of prey.
That's the size. So there was another example in here with sparrowhawks. I found I was always confused about sparrowhawks. And then when I'd noticed this patterning of the depiction of it, I was reading the description of sparrowhawks. This formative field guide for me gives a size range for sparrowhawks, goes into all sorts of descriptions of other distinctions, but just a size range, and nowhere mentions that the female is larger. It's interesting. And that's not a case of not knowing, right? I mean, the data is there, and that's been known forever, and it's easy to observe. But it explained why I was confused.
I'm surprised.
And again, I don't think that's... it's completely unconscious, because there is a lot of detail in there about other things that distinguish the sexes. But, and I wondered in the case of the sparrowhawk specifically, you know, its predator, does a larger female predator, is there something about the 1960s where that is actually you resist that subconsciously again? I don't know. What kinds of social conditions frame this? I mean, that's...
Well, yeah, but you're thinking that that period framed it, and I'm still looking at the bias now. So one of the things that I think I pleased you with is that I've Donahayed my book, which is the first time you'd heard your name used as an adjective, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, or a verb, yeah.
Sorry, descriptive and...
Or in any way other than as a, An insult, yeah.
It was not at all insulting. So, let's just. You don't have. Do you have? Did we talked about Donald Duck? How did we illustrate that? Did we do anything? When you think of Donald Duck, yeah, could you play us a typical sound from Donald Duck?
Okay.
Well, where to get that in the collection?
It's very straightforward. Here we have Donald Duck. Hopefully. So Donald Duck quacks, quite obviously. But male mallards don't really quack. That's the female.
Males sound more like this.
Yeah, the males don't quack. The females quack. But when we have Donald Duck on the television, he's quacking like a woman.
And especially if it looks like a duck, that looks like a duck, it's probably a female mallard.
Yeah. But the best of all is that mallard is French for male duck. That's there's nothing that isn't biased in the whole thing with mallards, even down to the way they mate, which we when we were writing the book, because of the discomfort that the female is thought to feel when mating, we had a whole load in there about what was the title that Collins took out?
Are you referring to duck sticks?
Duck sticks, it was, yeah. They didn't like duck sticks. They took, which was fine with us because we were a bit worried about duck sticks as well. But if you think of ducks, if you start to think about sexing bird sounds, well, your lovely question from the very back, was exactly the question we started to ask about bird sound libraries. So there was an article done on bird sound libraries. Can you can't remember, can you? I mean, I think basically we talked about having the fourth largest bird sound library. Well, ours isn't public. But the Zeno Canto is public. It's a collection of everyone. Hands up if you've made a contribution to Zeno Canto. All right, hands up if you use Zeno Canto. Yes. And the title in the book here we've chosen was "Oh No, Zeno Canto," because what happened, what Zeno Canto started as, so what it was a group of Dutch bird sound recordists who specialized in birds of South America. And they all had these massive collections. I didn't really quite know what to do with them.
Yeah, I found it. So in 2016, Zeno Canto had 0.01% of the bird sounds labeled female. As of the same year, the largest collection of bird sounds, the Macaulay Library, managed 0.03% of contributions labeled female. And I suppose you want to say what we managed.
Because I like to brag.
Okay. So in the Sound Approach collection, we have recordings of females for 41% of Western Palearctic species. And that's not including recordings of male and female together without knowing which sound was which. For males, the figure is 74%. So we're not judging in this, we're not counting in the same way, but we have managed a much better coverage of females.
And it's the reason why, all of the different birders we've used to collect the information are capable. Because one of the things we worked out, I think Arnaud worked out, was that the guys that had collected the South American sounds, bear in mind that Arnaud had also spent several years collecting, so it was very difficult to see the birds, wasn't it?
Yeah. Topical poets.ca.
So they assumed, or they just labelled that way, because they couldn't see what was singing. And the interesting thing is that in the tropics, females sing as much as males. So in an area where they should have had even more, so if you look at the zoogeographic zones, in Australasia, the birds duet and they sing together. They hold a territory. They feed their young from that territory. The female sings against other females, the male against other males, and then they duet. In the tropics, much the same. They have, a territory that they feed their young from, and then they protect that territory males and females both singing, both duetting, and so females are probably producing as much song. I haven't read a paper on that, so I'm not sure, but as much song as the males. It's only when they come up into the Western Palearctic, Eastern Palearctic, and the Arctic that they change, because the sacrifice of migrating so far means that the females stopped singing because they were busy choosing, is what they were doing, choosing. And the males sung to impress. And they did protect the territory, but they no longer worked in a territory anymore. So really that belief that our birds are all holding territory and they're feeding their young, in our area, that's really not true. And the other big deal is in Australia and in all the tropics, there's next to no extra pair copulation. So the female is very content with her male. He brings up his own young. Whereas here, I mean, red-breasted flycatchers in Beloitza, 40% of the young they're bringing up are not their own young. And what happens there is that and someone described it to me, I can't know, was it today or something, about robin? They've been watching a robin in their garden, and they've been watching how lovely it was. People are always so romantic about robins, aren't they? How lovely it was as the male and the female were together, and she was calling all the time. Well, she's in ovulation, and she's calling because she's hoping to attract a few extra male copulations. And he is following her because he is bloody determined she's not going to do it. So in the same study of those red-breasted flycatchers, I can't remember exactly what the study is called, but it's got a great name like The Loyalty of a Robin. They are only getting 10% extra pair copulation because he's so attentive during ovulation. But yeah,
the loyalty of a robin, isn't it suggestive again of how our assumptions, how we even with something as purportedly objective and dispassionate as science, as observation, that we're still projecting our own patterns on what we see. So, for example, the defending territory, was that notion based on observed behavior or on projection of human assumptions about what the function of that song behavior was?
it's difficult to tell where it all went wrong. And somewhere along the line, studies, say in the Galapagos, were pushed on. So each zoogeographical zone has a completely different setup, especially for vocalizations. So the assumption, and that's what our Dutch friends in Sino-Canto have done, they made the assumption that what they had learned and experienced in the Netherlands was similar to there. But it's not at all similar. I mean, in South America, so I told everybody this morning that you could get your field guide and you could divide it at the woodpeckers, so I'm just going to complicate that only a bit, so you don't have to worry. It's only when you travel abroad. It's still the same. You can still go right the way to the woodpeckers and all of those birds before you could trust, and everything after the woodpeckers you have to question. It's still the same, but it's not the same in South America because they have something. They have suboceans, right?
And they also have parrots and hummingbirds,
which also don't abide by the rules. So it's chaos. And if you're going to record a lot of birds in South America with the attitude of a European, you're bound to failure, basically. So when I say that I would say that I have a female colleague who has gone through the book with a fine-tooth comb. And it would have been great if she could have interviewed instead of me, but she's in Norway. So we've gone through it over and over and over again, and the number of bias points we find, even down to the way we might caption something, who quite clearly had the female predominant, we still say the male and the female. You know, it's amazing, and I'm sure it's still got a few bits in that, and in due course you'll write to me and say, "No, I liked the fact you used my name in that way, but can we just point out that?"
No, I'm very happy you verbified my name, and I'll have to tell my father. He will really be delighted. He will be delighted.
Mind you, the very need that you had to tell your father is a bit of an issue, isn't it, Red?
No, my father introduced me to birds.
Yeah.
He's 90 and still watching birds. He's watching all sorts of interesting birds. He's in Australia,
Oh, yeah.
which is where he lives. So I just think he would be delighted that his name has been lent
Yes, good.
through this process. Though he is probably about as dyed-in-the-wool sexist as is possible to be. So that will learn him.
Yeah, Chip, you would have loved Lucy, who would have interviewed you if it had not been me. So one of the other things I really loved about this book was, well, it's not that you complain about the standard of nature writing, but you are a bit irritated by most of it, I think.
Yeah, I'm well, I think that there are a number of different things about what's called nature writing that I have explored in the essay that you're referring to, and it's a very polarized thing, isn't it? That there are the purists at one end who actually want nature writing to be natural history, as was, and something like that, and they're the more the narrative end, who see a marketing opportunity because nature writing sells and sells and sells and sells if it's branded as nature writing. So at the other end of the spectrum is, if I mention a robin, it's nature writing. So we'll brand it as nature writing.
I recently, I think I told you already, I recently did a book on poetry and business. And someone said to me, why did you choose the least popular 2 subjects to write your book on? I just like to write it. I like poetry and I like this. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. It's, well...
I should have said it was nature writing, should I?
But birds, I mean, why is there this popular... Okay, not in this room, but there is this popular attitude to people who like birds and anything about birds. It's the most boring thing in the world. Bird watchers are identified as the most boring people in the world. Wasn't there a study like 5 years ago?
That's so crestfallen. Yes, from the back again. Another lovely question.
If bird watchers are the most boring, where does that post train spotters now?
It's a really good thing my partner isn't here, because my partner's a train driver. So
Train spot.
he's also trained. Well, he's not quite a train.
He spots them coming the other way.
So he's a steam train nerd. But nothing wrong with that. No. No, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with being a bird watcher, but it's just
to bring you back onto nature writing.
nature writing. So there, I think there is a very polarized discussion about what constitutes nature writing and what nature writing should be. In 2014, Mark Cocker weighed in on it, had a bit of a go, specifically about the nature writing memoir, and really taking issue with women's writing about the natural world, but not as women's writing. It just so happened that the nature writing memoir that he was having an issue with was by a woman. Then there is a whole genre of self-discovery.
Are we talking about H for Hawke? Is that what he was critical?
I think he referred to H for Hawke. It was Wild. It was Wild. The book Wild.
I haven't read that. It's probably in the pile.
It's probably in the pile. It's mentioned somewhere in here. But I think the whole problem with the idea of nature writing is that it's a marketing idea. It's a publishing idea, and it doesn't exist in and of itself. I mean, if you go to a bookshop and you look for nature writing, there's the whole gamut of things there, from field guides to somebody who happens to mention a robin. So I think the discussion about nature writing maybe is a bit misplaced. But for me, what what if I could define nature writing, if I were the boss of nature writing, thank God I'm not, it would combine some aspect of really close observation. It doesn't have to be an ornithologist's expertise, but close observation, accuracy, fact checking, please. I mentioned earlier the starlings nesting under the pier in this novel that I had read, when they roost under the pier. So fact checking, but also evocative writing, because there's a lot of really dull writing about the
Well, I
natural
was
world.
intending to go to sleep.
Yeah.
You thought that.
You spoiled.
There's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of narrative writing about the natural world, which is actually not about the natural world, where the natural world is serving as a background or a backdrop, or the kind of impetus for some very, very different concern. So there's got to be some engagement with not just the natural world,
You
but
have the
why
idea
you're
for-
writing about
for a
it.
prize?
Yes, I'm designing a bird writing prize. So keep your eyes peeled. There will soon be a website and there will be a Substack. Ornithography. Keep an eye for ornithography. And if you like writing about birds, then sure. No, start writing. Start writing. Yeah, it's a plan. I'm hoping.
Would this be an appropriate time to ask for questions, football?
I think it'd be a lovely time to ask the question.
Okay. Any questions?
Any questions? Anyone? But you start us up.
I thought you were going to get us going.
There is a question.
So how would you describe your book? Is it a natural history book?
No. I don't think it's a natural history book. I mean, a natural history is, again, me being a bit coy. It's that. I mean, I think it's an essay about. I think it's a collection of essays about uncertainty. And birds in the natural world are part of that uncertainty. Our relationships to each other and our relationships to non-human species, and the uncertainty about those relationships, and how you, what's the right way? What's the moral way? How ought we to see the world around us and respond to the world around us? Whether it's so it's a sort of an anti-expertise collection, in the sense that it's not taking positions about what ought to be, but asking the questions. How do you know? How do you know things? How do you know what you know? There is one essay specifically about uncertainty, and it centers on crows. And where I live, and I say this very carefully in this particular crowd, there are flocks of crows. And I keep checking and rechecking. I know rooks flock, crows don't flock, but maybe they're not flocks. Maybe they're big families. Maybe they're teenage gangs. Whatever. They are crows, and there's more than a small family, and I see it repeatedly. So I'm thinking, how do I deal with that? I know this fact about corvids, but the evidence is telling me something quite different. I've done everything I can to test what I'm seeing. Maybe this environment is different from other environments where corvids are being observed. There are very few rooks around. It's poor upland soil. What is it about here that there's so many crows?
Here in the harbour, we get flocks of crows feeding on the shorelines. So every time the tide drops,
Yeah.
we did a survey and had 50.
Flock of crows. That's the first time anybody else has said flock of crows to me.
Yeah, we don't like
50 or
that.
60 together. So yeah, that's very.
But what's so exciting about the flocks of crows is it's something that wasn't seen. So let's say it turned up 25 years ago, and it hadn't been seen since the Middle Ages before. So because of the game culture and all the killings, So I can't think of a time when. So if we were to go out together, I could show you a flock of crows here or there or somewhere else, and what they're all doing is waiting for a vacant territory to come free, and they're not coming free because they're not being killed.
Right.
And so we get to experience. So what actually happens is I cycle along Beta, which is the bit of reclaimed land, and the crows are all fishing. They're fishing vertically. So they pick up a shellfish, which they can't open easily, and they drop it on the pavement. I cycle over it, and they sort of come down behind me, and they eat it. And because I'm a nerd, I know they're all juveniles because I can see elements of juvenile plumage about them when I'm cycling past them. And I just find that so thrilling that I'm experiencing something that others haven't. So, I mean, just like everyone probably in here, I was taught if it's two, it's crows, and if it's a flock, it's rooks. But
doesn't that tell us everything about the way that certainty can get in the way of what, or assumptions can get in the way of what you're actually observing, so that it shapes what you're observing, rather than you observe and draw conclusions.
if you spent your time with Killian Milani, you'd have to identify them to age and W. Because there's, if you're with a pet, you have to sort things out, don't you? So that's part of the joy. And we try to explain this on the bird boat, don't we? Why are we interested in aging the Great Northern Diver? Well, we're interested in aging it because we're desperate to see one with little short stubby wings, because the males molt on their winter sites. And that really intrigues us. So we're always aging. And that's not the only reason we age them. There's other nerdy reasons, but the more you go in, the more everything becomes illuminated. And I mean, that's certainly what we experience, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
Any other questions? Come on. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Mark.
So you talk about living your life through birds. Probably most people in this room live their life through birds. But I would imagine everybody's journey of living their life through birds is quite different. What's your journey of living your life through birds like? How does that what do you do that's unique, like living your life through birds?
Not as a bird watcher.
No.
I mean, I'm not. I've only recently really embraced that term. I've been in denial about being a bird watcher much of my adult life.
It was the nerd thing, was it?
Yeah, it was all sorts of bad associations, and assumptions. Yes, nerdiness, but also splaininess, right? Being on the receiving end of a lot of mansplaining about birds. Yeah, my father's got lots of, because so is my brother. But actually, my father is a lot of the reason why birds even register for me. I mean, he and his twin brother went bird watching as kid, as is always the case. There's always somebody, right, who's sort of instrumental, and so we just always went bird watching as a family. That's what we did together. And I don't think I ever really knew it was anything unusual until I got to be a teenager, and then it, other things kicked in. And
you get interested in trains, or
boys. I married an American, and I moved to America. I lived in California for years, and he's a very good friend now, but an very good friend, but he's extremely urban, very urban-oriented, very human-oriented person. And for him, my interest in birds was my Englishness, that was the English, crazy, weird, my family. It was, and I really shut it down because it was an inconvenience. It was an otherness that he couldn't really tolerate. And so my engagement with birds in California for the 12 years that I lived there was a bit sort of...
Which part of California?
The Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. It was always a bit not hidden, but it wasn't fully embraced. And I think re-engaging with birds really happened when I moved back to the UK.
Little part of your Englishness.
Yeah, or my Britishness, I guess. Because I haven't lived in England since I left at 17. So I had lived in Wales ever since I came back. But I think to answer that's sort of the background. I think for me, watching birds really returns me to myself in the sense that they're just getting the fuck on with their lives, you know? And all this noise and all this angst and, you know, is the planet going to blow up and, you know, who's going to be elected in May and all the stresses, the strains. And there's a pair of long-tailed tits calling, and then there's another 20 long-tailed tits coming through. And they don't care that I'm watching them or not watching them. They're just getting on with their lives. And there's something... So why birds? Why not, you know, any other species? Because they're there. They're just always there, always busy, always doing their own thing. And it just makes human endeavour so secondary. Does that answer that question?
What about giving you sleepless nights though?
So you ditch your husband to get closer to birds. That's fine.
Well, okay, kind of. Yeah, not quite.
Very male interpretation messages.
You had a question from...
Yeah, just... so you say that when you refound the book from your childhood, you were able to see it in a whole new light. I'm just wondering what kind of what you had to go through to gain that new critical lens. Because it's not even a human, you're seeing birds on the page, so yeah.
Yeah, how did I see it differently? I to be honest, I don't know quite what triggered that observation, except that I was I don't know. I was just very involved in writing about female experience, I think, at the time, and I'd done, you know, wearing my other hat as an academic, I'd written a biography of an overlooked woman writer who'd just kind of fallen from view, for a number of reasons. But through I was commissioned to write her biography, and just finding the ways in which, you know, women were rendered invisible for all sorts of reasons, and then also just being aware of, for example, in the book world, the proportion of books that are reviewed by women, the proportion of books by women that are reviewed, the proportion of editors that sell, you know, every year those statistics are published. And so that was kind of something that was, I suppose, at the forefront of my mind. I'm not aware of, you know, taking that attitude to, you know, then look at the field guide. But I probably was primed.
Or, just educated, I guess, being exposed to the realities of the world compared to when you're a kid and you just accept.
It was also seeing this, I think, actually, come to think of it, it was finding this early childhood field guide in the bookshop, which I hadn't seen since I was probably 10 or something, probably really triggered. So I saw it differently, and I saw a pattern in it because I hadn't seen that book for, I know, however many decades. And then I went to look at the book that I do regularly use. Oh, my word. Never noticed that before, and this is the book that I look at every moment. So,
will you be writing about Tristram next?
I am writing about Tristram. Oh, I have a Tristram story for you. You're talking about fish owls.
Yeah.
I should explain about Tristram. Tristram of Tristram's Grackle, and I've been researching him for years. And
what? Why?
Why? He's an incredibly vivid, interesting writer. he because I've written about Israel Palestine, he's been very present for me in a way as I've kind of refigured my relationship to Israel Palestine, because of course he established his expertise through becoming an expert in Palestinian birds in the 1860s and 70s. But in addition to that, and he's recognized as having really laid the groundwork for the birds of the Middle East, ornithology of the Middle East, I guess. But he's an incredibly vivid travel writer and fantastic raconteur, and incredibly problematic because he touches on all of the imperial colonial tropes that we were talking about a bit earlier in the panel. Definitely at the forefront of British imperial aspirations in the Middle East, his Anglican English viewpoint.
He was a clergyman, was he?
He was a clergyman from Durham. The way that he saw the population, the multicultural population of Palestine in the 1860s, the way he writes about it, really challenging. But I'm also really interested in the question of how he gained his reputation, how he did his collecting, of course with the help of local people who don't get named, don't get acknowledged, except for one person does get named and he's a really interesting figure. But this whole question also of 19th century collecting and shooting as a necessary part of establishing, the data, was also a form of self-colonialism. I mean, it's fair. Okay, we know about archaeological items being put in the British Museum. I don't even need to name those. We all know which ones I'm talking about. There was a contemporary of Tristram. He meets him near Jerusalem, and he's just nicked this tomb from Jerusalem, and it had to break it in order to get it out and shipped it off to France, and it was in the Louvre. It's been relent back to Jerusalem. So that, we can get all outraged about those forms of colonial theft. But the 600, 700, 800 birds that he shot on one trip and brought back, all the eggs that he brought back. I mean, I'm not making a judgment about the shooting and the collecting because it's of the period. But
for us, it's very interesting because obviously we see ourselves as the new Tristram, and we don't shoot anything, we don't kill anything, we take blood, we take feathers, we take recordings, we look at all sorts of other things. So I like to hope, apart from anything else, I didn't know that the job of the Victorian benefactor that could send all these people out was still free until I got it.
So, but you're not at the forefront of empire, are you? I mean, that's not really.
Give me kind of empire. Can you tell?
Like the fish owl. Tristram shot a fish owl in Lebanon. He was heading in 1863, December 1863, and he remarks how amazing it was to see one there because he thought of it so far from India.
So is that where you would expect one to be in there?
It's probably in the collection at Tring.
I don't know if they're there anymore. Probably not, because there's so much hunting goes on in Lebanon. But I knew that they had been throughout the Middle East, throughout the Levant, not that long ago.
I know it was someone who still saw the fish owl in Israel. Yeah. 1975.
Oh, really?
Which was a single bird that was killed.
Wow.
By many people in the 70s. But it died and had no partner, so that was the end of it.
But that late, that's wow. Okay.
Thank you ever so much for listening. Do buy the book. Have a lovely time reading it. Don't try and take it downstairs for a little snooze because it's not going to be like that. Thank you so much, and thank you very much for the book. I've loved it.
No, thank you, Pat. Excellent. Thank you.